Week 1 is in the books, but it's not too late to get closer to the game you love with DraftKings 1 Week Fantasy Football. This Sunday, DraftKings is hosting a free contest with $100,000 in total prizes to celebrate the launch of their new game. Pick 'em. Just use code REPLAY to play in DraftKings free contest with $100,000 in total guaranteed prizes this Sunday. It's free. Why wouldn't you try? DraftKings.com code REPLAY. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
I want to start with something a little bit offbeat. Did you see what they did on the south side of Chicago yesterday?
Of course I did.
In what is someday going to be known, what is it going to be? Performance Arrow Down, whatever it is.
Park. Arrow Down Park.
It remains U.S. Cellular Field for the time being. Yeah. One way or another, the Chicago White Sox, for reasons known only to them, decided to set a Guinness Book of World Record for...
That's why.
I guess.
Come on.
For most dogs to attend a sporting event.
There you go.
And they wound up doing it.
Yeah, they do.
Invited people to come and bring their dogs, and they wound up with a certificate that says this has set a Guinness Book of World Record on September 13th, 2016, the most dogs attending a sporting event achieved by the Chicago White Sox, USA, at U.S. Cellular Field, Chicago, Illinois, USA, 13 September 2016.
So this is one begging to be broken by somebody else. They had 1,122 dogs, and the stipulation was that for a 10-minute period, all the dogs had to be in their seat. Kid you not. The dogs had to be in the, and you'll see the shot of it. The owner's basically, holding the smaller dogs, but the dogs had to be in their seat for a 10-minute block. And they were enough, 1,122 dogs, for them to set a Guinness world record. I love that because I love the whole Guinness Book of World Records. I had them growing up. I love it. I loved the show. I watched the show. There's some of the wackiest stuff out there. So good for them. And that's one that another ball club is going to try and break at some point.
And I too, growing up, used to love. I was fascinated by the Guinness Book of World Records. There's one in particular I remember where the dude set the record for putting the most quarters on your elbow and then going like that, like you catch it.
Who hasn't tried that?
I used to try doing it, but he did it with hundreds of them.
I know, yeah.
Whatever. So I've always been fascinated by that. And so we pulled up a list of some of the best or craziest or most out there kind of Guinness Book of World Records that exist. And, Mike, do you have a couple of those for me?
I have
Let me hear a couple.
How about he was at age 60. Now we'd have to wait a while for that. I'm closer to that. Okay. Oldest male stripper.
That's not exactly what I had in mind with the social play I wanted to hear this morning, but
I'm just talking about records.
Tell me more.
Well, right now I'm just talking about records. I'm not saying that's what I'm going for and waiting 7 years for. Though, you're getting your six pack.
I'm going to have a six pack.
Yeah, there you go.
So I could be a male stripper. Like for example, in 1978, wrestlers Billy and Benny McCrary were dubbed the world's heaviest twins. One of them weighed 743 pounds. The other one, 723 pounds.
A lot of bacon.
That was like 1,500 pounds worth of twin. There were all these crazy, wacky records. And I got to thinking, we could set a record. How hard could it be? If you could just invite people to bring a bunch of dogs to a ball game and get into the Guinness Book of World Records, why can't we set some sort of record?
There is no doubt that there's something out there that you and I as a duo or you and I individually could do. And as a matter of fact, I've already picked out one for me and one for you.
Okay, because in 2001, a parrot named Smudge set a record for most keys removed from a key ring by a parrot by slipping off 10 in under 2 minutes. In 2009, he got all the way up to 22.
How about that?
I mean, obviously, Smudge needs a hobby.
Yeah.
But my point is, these are the kinds of things that wind up in this book now.
One thing we could do, we could try. In 2004, Chad Fell blew the largest bubblegum bubble.
I don't like
20
that.
inches.
Not a big gum guy.
I'll do it. For the record, you'll be a gum guy. Okay?
If I had to, but that strikes me as it would have
Here's one you and I could try and do. And one, for you, it doesn't even involve you. It involves somebody in your family. For me, Donald... is it Gorski, I believe, in October 11th of 2012, consumed his 26,000th McDonald's Big Mac. Most Big Macs consumed in a lifetime.
I mean, I don't know how you're keeping track of that exactly.
Well, he's laying on a bunch of Big Macs, and he's got the record.
But how did the Guinness people see? That's what makes me think the whole thing is just like phony. I mean, how in the world do you verify that he ate 26,000 Big Macs over the course of his life?
Listen,
it's one thing to be at the ballpark last night and count all the
Guinness
dogs.
The Guinness Book of World Records is a true great book. Do not question it.
In 2011, Pete Glazebrook showed off the world's heaviest onion. It weighed 7 pounds, 15 and a half ounces in Harrogate, Northern England.
Guess you can say dude's got some onions, doesn't he?
Or at least one. So go ahead. What
Here's
is
you.
I'm thinking we could set a record. Let's set a Guinness Book of World Record.
Okay, we're going to try for the purposes of this show to get a duo record of some kind. But this is something you can do. You have a dog at home, right?
I do.
What's your dog's name?
My beloved dog, Phoebe.
What kind of dog is it?
She's a Labradoodle.
Ranmaru, a Labradoodle, boasts the longest eyelashes on a dog at 6.69 inches. There you go.
All right, Stace, if you're up, measure Phoebe's eyelashes.
And just let them grow.
I don't know how long they are.
Uh-huh.
She does have very expressive eyes.
Okay.
Like, Phoebes will look at me sometimes, and I think, there's something going on in there. Mm-hmm. Like, she's not just thinking,
there's something going on in there.
Pet meat.
We've already established that dogs can understand words.
Yeah, no. In your case, I think dogs are outthinking you on a regular basis.
I would agree.
So, okay, that would be your idea for my record. What's your idea for your record? Because I want the listeners to help us come up with an idea for our record.
Duo record.
I'm not even kidding about this. But go ahead.
There's got to be something that we can.
They put the stupidest records in this book. Let's set a record.
I agree with you. There are some of the craziest records out there. How about this one?
In 2000, Ann Atkins set the record for the largest collection of garden gnomes with 2010. Garden gnomes.
Garden gnomes. In 2013, now they say his name is obviously is a stage name, Johnny Strange, but this is who established the world record. Most apples held in your own mouth and cut in half by a chainsaw in 1 minute. I kid you not.
But this is what I'm talking about. These are records.
Yes.
And they made it in the book. Like There was a time in my life when I thought being in the Guinness Book of World Record was a really big deal. Mm-hmm. And then I see this idiocy like Val Kolopov of Alpharetta, Georgia, who's been recognized for the largest collection of toothpaste tubes at 2,037. So let's get to the point here because I want to get on to some sports.
Okay.
We want the record. We want you to suggest to us what Guinness Book of World Record could we set?
Can we do? What can we do?
Let's set a record, and let's get into this.
How
into
much
the book.
did you love that book, though? That big monster.
I loved it.
It's fantastic.
Yes. People our age are nodding their heads.
Yes.
And I have a feeling no one younger than us has any idea what we're talking about.
They just Google it now.
Yeah, and because all of this stuff has become so stupid.
Right.
There was a time when the Guinness Book of World Records seemed like it was a really cool accomplishment. It wasn't garden gnomes and toothpaste tubes.
It was great.
So what is, Romano, give me a hashtag so you can look them up. Was it Mike and Mike? What is it?
Mike and Mike Record.
Mike and Mike Record. Just tweet at us. Use the hashtag Mike and Mike Record.
Yeah.
And just suggest to us, what could we set a record for?
Yeah, what would legitimately be a Guinness Book of World Records record where somebody could come and see us do it and then give us our plaque, like the White Sox. And congratulations to them.
Yes, and to all 1,210 dogs.
1,222. 1,122.
I didn't mean to shortchange them any dogs last night.
1,122.
I hope they enjoyed the ball game.
And I hope they brought their own bags.
So we would like to set a record, and we'd like your help along the way. We may have already set a record for most minutes spent talking about this.
There you go.
So let's move on to other matters. What everybody's talking about, Mike and Mike, brought to you by Uber. Driving with Uber gives you the freedom and flexibility to set your own hours and earn extra money when it works for you. Get started today. Go to uber.com/drive now. That's UBER.com/drive now. Don't look now, but did you see who has the number one selling jersey in the National Football League?
Jump on it right now. The flavor of the month.
The Wentz wagon. Carson Wentz has the most popular jersey in the National Football League. People are losing their minds over Carson Wentz, and I can give you two examples. Do you want one from a really, really good football player, or do you want one from the most powerful person in the world?
Well, I'd always like to hear from the most powerful person in the world. What does my wife have to say?
She's actually number two. That was well played.
Thank you.
Here's President Obama on Carson Wentz.
I know I'm not the first person from the White House to come to Philly this week. Some of you may have seen Joe Biden at the Eagles game. He told me, Barack, you got to get on the Wentz wagon. Said we got a new quarterback. We got hope in Philly. And I had to explain, Joe, I am a Bears fan. And we play Philly next Monday night. So I got to stick with my team, but I am going to go to Philly and scout out what all the fuss is about.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
You're Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
A year ago, not one person on the planet whose last name is not Wentz is aware of who you are. You're the quarterback at North Dakota State.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, the president of the United States is using you in his patter as he's, on the campaign trail. It is just remarkable to me, the instant stardom that this kid has found, and his jersey is the number one selling jersey in the league.
And I think it's part of a whole story that obviously he was the second pick in the draft, the first pick in the draft. And the storylines have been Jared Goff, number one pick of the draft, healthy, but a healthy scratch. He's on the sidelines in clothes. All the talk of the preseason was about a fourth rounder in Dak Prescott for the Dallas Cowboys. Wow, look at the preseason he's having. Boy, maybe they have their quarterback of the future. Maybe they need him to be the quarterback of the now after Romo was hurt. And Carson Wentz a couple of weeks ago was hurt, not even practicing. It's a guy who threw 39 passes, so he was put to the side mainly because everybody kept talking about the new coach, Doug Peterson. He did this. He played for a while, and then Donovan McNabb took over. So that's at the very least what's going to happen. So let's just put Carson Wentz on the shelf for a little bit and wait. They bring in Chase Daniel as an excellent backup. Now, he's got the hairline fracture of the rib. Okay, he's really not going to do anything right now. And boom, boom, Sam Bradford's traded, and Carson Wentz is named the starter. It's not even like Bradford's traded, now we have to decide who's going to start. It's like Bradford's traded. Yeah, we have all the confidence in the world in Carson Wentz. It's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, you're right.
What just happened? So now, all of a sudden, I think the circumstances had a lot to do with it. He wasn't expected to see the field, and now he's the starter, and he goes out, and he drops 2 dime touchdown passes that were beautiful, completes about 60% of his passes, and doesn't turn the ball over one time. So, and it's in Philly.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about Philly fans, and you jump on that quickly there. So that's all that adds up to most selling jerseys.
And they're looking for something to get excited about. The 76ers had the number one pick in the NBA draft. The Phillies had the number one pick in the baseball draft. Their local teams have stunk recently. And so they're looking for something to get excited about, and for at least 1 week, he's given them that. But you just made my point better than I did. Forget about a year ago at North Dakota State. A week and a half ago, Sam Bradford was the starting quarterback of the Eagles. A week and a half later, the vice president is telling the president, you got to check out Carson Wentz.
Exactly. What a whirlwind experience.
So it is, and we'll see. Again, they play the Bears on Monday night. And unless you think that it is only the political set that is have a lot of hyperbole when it comes to Carson Wentz, his teammates are pretty excited about it as well. How about Jason Peters, offensive tackle, Philadelphia Eagles? Quote, he has it. All we got to do is keep the pocket clean, and he's going to throw it to the open guy, point blank. We're going to eat him up. When asked about Wentz's demeanor in the huddle, Peters said he's real confident. He's very confident in the huddle. And then he went a little bit farther. Did you see who he compared him to?
Yes, I did.
He can throw it just as good as Aaron Rodgers on the run. He's really accurate on the run. That's who he reminds me of, Aaron Rodgers. When he gets to moving, the way he throws the ball, that darts the ball on the run. So he is now, after one game, throwing into the same sentence the words Carson Wentz and Aaron Rodgers.
And that's I wouldn't. That's a shame to do to him. His own teammates, quite honestly, shouldn't even be doing that because you don't want to even mention anything like that after one start. But, that's a teammate being supportive of his player, and they're the ones that are going to know best. And that's, as I said before, when we were doing all the Dak Prescott talk out there, one of the things I said, forgetting the stats, is I liked his poise, and now we got a lot less of Carson Wentz, but I thought the same thing. And I remember talking about Jared Goff saying it looked like he had some happy feet in the pocket and stared down receivers, and I guess the coaching staff felt he wasn't ready, obviously, by deactivating him. So, but I'll say again, you don't pick a quarterback that high in the draft for this year. It is head scratching to go all the way to not playing and being inactive. That is absolutely a head scratcher, and we'll see how soon that changes. But I agree with Jason Peters. I did like his demeanor. Now, I don't see him in the huddle. I can only talk about what I see once the ball is snapped and see him in the pocket and how he moves. The guy, he's another one of those, Greeny, sneaky good athletes. We keep talking about the athletic quarterbacks that are out there, and sometimes you don't mention a guy like Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck's incredibly athletic when he takes off and run, and he's big, 6'4", 235 or so. Wentz is 6'5", just under 240. He's a big, strong, good-looking kid who moves well and is a good enough athlete to do just enough damage if he wants to take off. He's not going to set the world on fire, but he's going to move the chains. And it can be enough of a threat moving side to side, or at least he's shown that. We'll see. Again, it's been just one game. But that's the one thing you do see is there's a calmness, and that's key for a young guy who was part of not even an FBS program. It was always, okay, what's he going to do against not even Division I, FBS talent. Now he's going to the NFL, and that's more than half the ball game right off the bat, is having a calmness about you, which he seems to already have.
So he went from FCS, then he moved up, never played FBS. Now he played the Browns. Then we'll see how he does against an NFL defense. But the point that I'm making here is it's a very good start for him. And if you look at the confluence of circumstances, look at the other two extenuating features of this. One, he just played the Browns.
Right.
What did the Browns do? They traded away the pick that could have been Carson Wentz. So everyone is talking about that. The other is Wentz went number 2. Who went number 1? Jared Goff. Where was he? Watching, like everybody else, inactive, while his teammates put on the worst offensive performance maybe in Week 1 NFL history against a bad team the other night in San Francisco, which led our Louis Riddick to making the obvious observation, the Rams had better do something real quick and get Jared Goff on the field.
What you learn from this is that they have a long, long way to go. If you have to start on the offensive side of the football, and somewhere, somehow, somebody better figure out how to get Jared Goff comfortable enough where he can get on the football field for a number of different reasons. You think you're going to go into the home game here, and you're going to have Case Keenum starting a football game when you traded away so many assets to bring in this kid as the number 1 pick, and you had your pick of the litter of any player that you wanted. And you have him inactive tonight. And if you think you're going to go into a home game without him starting a football game, then, look, God help you, because I don't know what's going to happen with this football team.
Well, but here's the deal, and I understand what Lewis is saying, but if he's not ready, you don't put him out there. There's one thing to, I always say, if you get a team that's not supposed to be very good and you get that top pick, you play him and bloody his nose. But there's always the assuming, and the caveat being, that he isn't, a deer in headlights out there. And they obviously felt that he's not ready enough to deactivate him for the game. So I agree with Lewis. I hope he gets on the field as soon as he can, but he also it has to be a situation where they feel confident he can do a game plan and isn't getting lost in the lights out there. And, once he gets to that point, I know he said they got to get there quickly to him. I'm sure they want to. I'm sure they would have loved Jared Goff to go into training camp and take hold of that job. But it didn't happen. So we talk about, and Louis Riddick brought it up, is how much is it the coaching and the development there, the coaching he's getting, and him as a player, a combination of the two. But they obviously don't think he's ready, and I'm sure they want to get him ready. I think you'll see him sooner rather than later, and you're right, Cleveland still lives with the fact that they didn't take Wentz. Obviously, I don't think there's any doubt that because you just don't – I don't care what your system is. I kept talking about this the last couple of days. Does your system say you just acquire draft picks? I don't think your system in the NFL would ever say, I'm going to pass up on a quarterback at number 2 if we have him graded number 2. The Browns didn't have him graded that high. They didn't have him graded number 2, so they were going to take him number 2. So that's why they did what they did, and we'll see. Again, it's been one game, so we have the overreaction Monday, too far Tuesday. I don't know what we're going to call Wednesday, but let's just see what happens going forward. But as far as Goff, I do agree with Lewis. At this point, I want to get him on the field, but I want to make sure he can function in a game plan before you get him on the field.
I totally agree with you. All I'm saying is that these are the two teams that very noticeably didn't take Carson Wentz.
Right.
The Browns traded away the pick that became Carson Wentz. The Rams traded up and took Jared Goff ahead of Carson Wentz.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the vice president or the president are chit-chatting about Carson Wentz, and Jared Goff is inactive for a team that went love 28 on opening night. So those are sort of the perfect storm circumstances of Week 1. Week 2 could tell an entirely different story.
Right.
Wentz could look awful Monday night against the Bears. Goff could get out there at some point soon and play well. The Browns, well, who knows what might happen. I mean, their quarterback already got knocked out for the year, but maybe next year they get Deshaun Watson and he winds up, being a star for a decade. It doesn't mean all these things were wrong. It just means it's a rough week if you're one of the we didn't take Carson Wentz group.
This is the week you want to keep Carson Wentz, down a little bit. You want to make sure it's his turn to get the donuts. As a rookie, you want to nitpick him at practice a little bit, and tape just to not let him, feel too good about himself going into week 2.
The best of Mike and Mike.
There probably wasn't a better story week 1 in the NFL than Victor Cruz, who caught 4 balls for 34 yards and got to do his salsa dance in the end zone.
Yes, he did.
After scoring a touchdown in the Giants' win after having essentially missed both of the last 2 years with injury. And so it's our pleasure to welcome Victor Cruz back to Mike and Mike on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Good morning, Victor. Thanks for some time today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling very well, man. Thanks for having me this morning.
I got to ask you, I remember you were asked to be on Dancing with the Stars with your salsa and everything else, and both Mike and I have been around you in different settings. Has a dance ever felt better than that one did in the end zone on Sunday after all the time that it took you to get back?
Not at all. That might have been the best dance I've done in a very, very long time. But obviously going through so many ups and downs, so many setbacks, and so many things that I had to face, to be able to just suit up in that first game and, just want to contribute in any way possible and then end up scoring a go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter. I mean, you can't paint the story any better than that.
So take us on the trip a little bit. I tell Greeny all the time, as a player, when you're hurt and you're not playing and you're out for a long time, you sometimes feel like a ghost on that team, like you're not part of that team because you're rehabbing by yourself, and players go through it all the time. So then you've tried to come back from a couple of injuries. So when was the moment, whether it was during rehab or during a practice session, where you felt you are back and you felt, you know what, I can get back on the field and do what I need to do?
I think it was the stretch of practices right towards the end of training camp, leading into a couple of the preseason games. I knew I was feeling good, and I wanted to make sure that I could do all the things that I could do. So I wanted to push myself in these practices, and I did that, and I came out great, and I was making plays and doing different things that I knew I could do, prior to the injuries. So I knew that in that moment I could play again, and I could play in this league and play at a high level.
Before that moment, was there a moment that you thought you might be done playing?
Never. I never thought about that. I never thought about being done. I knew that I had to believe in my rehab process, believe in the things that I was doing out there. Have faith in God, trust in Him that He would get me back to form, and trust my teammates. I mean, even though I wasn't around as often, when I was around and my teammates saw me, they were always encouraging me, always uplifting me. And even after the touchdown on Sunday, I mean, so many teammates just coming up to me saying they're happy for me because they've seen the struggle. They've seen me in the training room, with my knee, not even being able to bend it or flex it or anything like that for months and months and weeks. And they saw me each and every day, so they were happy for me, which was a beautiful feeling.
Victor Cruz back for the Giants, and certainly a lot of changes since the last time that you were an active part of the team, with the coaching changes and the explosion onto the scene of Odell Beckham Jr. and everything else with this offense. So how would you assess what this Giants offense can be this year with you healthy in it?
I believe we can be special. Obviously, we definitely have to continue to work and lay down the foundation for what we want to accomplish as the season goes on. But I think we have all the tools to be a very special offense and a very special team. But obviously, we just got to put that together and believe in that ourselves and take it from there. But I think we have a lot of tools. We have a veteran quarterback, obviously, and Eli Manning. We got a bunch of targets for him to throw it to, and some guys in the backfield that can run the football. So I think we have some solid pieces to make a run here this season. But we just want to take it 1 week at a time and see where it takes us.
Victor Cruz joining us, 4 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown in their win over Dallas. And another thing I talk about with injured players that are coming back, how were you the next day? How were you, the soreness-wise, and able to get back to doing what you do, even after the performance you had and the game that you played?
Definitely very sore the next day. Obviously, when the adrenaline starts to diminish and you're kind of calming down and you start to feel all these ailments from the game, I was pretty sore, to say the least. But, it's football at the same time, and you're going to be sore. There's going to be, days when you feel very, very sore, especially after the game. But the key is, getting in that rehab room, getting in the cold tub, doing the things you do to get your body back to form and getting ready for a good practice week and getting ready for your next opponent. So we're in the full swing of this thing, man. I'm excited to be a part of it.
So, and I did see you that next day at the Cantor Fitzgerald event. It was two things. It was great to see the big smile on your face, and also I only saw you for a second. Did anybody have you salsa at all? Did you salsa in there as you were trying to raise some money?
Yeah, I mean, you try to tell them that it's on-field only, but they don't really care about that, so they just want to see you dancing. But it's good. Anytime it's for a great cause like Cantor Fitzgerald, their charity day, to honor those people lost in 9/11, it's always a beautiful thing to dance for, so I didn't mind it too much.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Our season-long chats with the one, the only from Monday Night Football, John Gruden, who is back and better than ever with us. Good morning, John. How have you been?
Hey, pretty good. Good morning, guys.
It is a pleasure to chat. It's been an awful long time. John Gruden with us. Gruden's Groove, powered by Die Hard at Sears Auto Centers. And I want to start, before we get to the games that you had on Monday night, I want to start by actually looking ahead to the game you have coming up Monday, because we opened the show this morning talking about Carson Wentz, and you will see him Monday night when the Eagles play the Bears. And you heard it there in the open. A week and a half ago, Sam Bradford was the starting quarterback of the Eagles. A week and a half later, here's the narrative. The president is hearing from the vice president, you need to check out this Carson Wentz guy. The 49ers made the wrong pick by passing on Wentz, and the Browns made the wrong decision by trading away the number 2 pick. So let's go back to reality. I'm sure you're already up and looking at the tape. What did you see from Carson Wentz in week 1?
Well, the first thing you see is he can handle a lot of football, just like he did in college. He can come out of the huddle, call a lot of different kind of plays. They're not just lining up in 1 or 2 formations like some of these teams. They're running unbalanced lines, slot formations, no back sets. They're asking him to audible. They're putting a lot on the quarterback. That's what impresses me the most. That's why I liked him, because of his preparation in college. This guy made some throws that were difficult. He went down the field against Joe Hayden for a touchdown, I think one of the best corners in the league, and he showed a lot of toughness in the pocket. But they can still run a lot of different kind of college plays, the zone reads. It's a lot to defend for. This is a good player.
Sure is. The 2 touchdown passes were just absolutely spot on, and he has some athletic ability to move as well. On the other side of that, the number 1 pick, Jared Goff. What does it say to you about where somebody is in their development? If they're that number 1 pick, there certainly are expectations. They don't have to all come this year, but you're deactivated for week 1. So you're basically the 3rd-string quarterback. How far behind are you in development if you're not even dressed for game 1?
Well, Goff's going to take some time, Mike. Some of these guys come from totally different programs. It's not their fault. Goff is only a junior. He's a true junior. Didn't redshirt, never been in a huddle, didn't have much to his snap count. A lot of things they're asking him to do are different. And I don't think the Rams are a very good offensive team. They don't have a great offensive line. They don't have a lot of receivers that are going to go to the Pro Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised if Goff sits the entire season. Carson Palmer did that. Donovan McNabb did that to a degree. A lot of quarterbacks have done that. I know there's a lot of pressure to push him out there, but if he's not ready, don't play him.
You know, while we're on the subject, Mike and John Gruden, another rookie who started with all the hype in the world based upon his preseason performance, was Dak Prescott, and he played well against what I think is going to prove to be a really good and certainly improved Giants defense. What did you see from Prescott in week 1?
Well, he did what he did in the preseason. He took care of the ball. He's a dual threat. I just like the way he plays. You can tell he's a lot more experienced than most young quarterbacks. He did it in the SEC. He put a program on his back, and he knows how to distribute the football. He can stand in the pocket, go through his progressions. He can audible if you ask him to. He can get out of trouble, and his arm talent, I think, is vastly underrated. I think their offense is going to grow a little bit more towards some of the things they did at Mississippi State, because this kid is a very good runner.
John, going to the other side of the ball, 2 cornerbacks to talk about. First, Darrelle Revis, a guy who listen, what he was as a shutdown corner was one of the best. And over time, that certainly fades. And now he was playing against one of the top receivers in A.J. Green. But talk about adjustments defensively you have to make if the guy you count on as that star isn't what he once was, how much you may have to adjust.
Well, you might have to adjust a lot, especially if he's making $20 million. It could ruin your whole football team. But, when you got A.J. Green one-on-one with not much help, that's a tall order. He was in position to make a couple plays, and you got to sometimes tip your hat to the other guy. I'll go back, Mike. A lot of these veteran players haven't played hardly at all in the preseason, and they don't practice like they used to either. And I think it's really difficult to ask these guys to come out and play 75 plays in an opener like we're accustomed to seeing them play. So I think you're going to see Revis play better and better as the season unfolds.
And then the other one is Josh Norman. Antonio Brown has a monster night for the Steelers, but on the other side, Josh Norman didn't line up on him when Antonio was to the offensive left. So I'll just ask it this way. There are people saying if you're going to pay a guy as the top, one of the top cornerbacks in the game, shouldn't he follow the best receiver? If it's not that simple, explain to everybody why it's not.
Well, we need a couple minutes to do that, but when you play man-to-man coverage and you have Norman follow a certain receiver, that involves your entire secondary. What happens if the receiver lines up in the backfield? What happens if they do a lot of things in terms of run support? There's a lot of things that go into this. The techniques are different. Obviously, when you play right and left, some guys can't do that. Just because you have one guy that can do it, it doesn't mean you have two or three guys that can do it. And they really thought Brashad Breeland is an excellent corner. And to be quite honest, after broadcasting that game, the coverage wasn't all bad. Antonio Brown, I think, is the best in football, and he slayed a lot of dragons in the last 3 years, 375 catches. So get used to it. Whoever they have next will see a lot of the same problems.
Yeah, Mike and John Gruden, you're right. The coverage was there on a lot of those plays, and Roethlisberger and Brown are able to beat it. So I'd love to get you to just sort of give us your sense of what that offense has become. Roethlisberger, when he first came into the league, that was a Steeler team that was built in the traditional Steeler ways of running the football and playing defense, and they have sort of morphed into where they are now, maybe as explosive as any offense in the National Football League, led by their quarterback and their star receivers. So take all the time you need. Tell us your thoughts, having, I'm sure, spent an entire week watching the Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
Well, Mike, Roethlisberger doesn't get the credit that he deserves as a quarterback that makes a lot of decisions with his preparation. He's taken control of this offense. He's in a no-huddle offense. He's like a coach on the field. They've had a lot of changes around him. How do you go out there without Hines Ward? Now it's Heath Miller. Now you lose Le'Veon Bell. They continue to plug players in, yet the constant is Ben Roethlisberger. He used to be a freestyling, scrambling gunslinger, and that's how the Steelers won games, I believe, with his dynamic playmaking. But now he can still do that, and he's at the line of scrimmage, keeping the Steelers in optimum play selection with his football mind and his experience. He's a double-edged sword. I wish everybody luck that plays Roethlisberger in the Steelers. They can hurt you a lot of different ways.
And one of them is that D'Angelo Williams runs for 143 yards. And I think I heard you make the comment during the telecast. He's the oldest running back in the National Football League, and he's in that spot for 3 weeks. And then they get Le'Veon Bell back. But here's the significant part. He ran for 143 yards. Lamar Miller went over 100 yards, and that was it. We only had two running backs in all of Week 1 rush for 100 yards. Do you think that is the beginning of something we will see all season long? Has the day and time in the league the way it is right now of guys running for 100 yards in a game, do you think we will see extraordinarily little of that this season?
Probably, unless something changes. A lot of these runs, I hate to say it every broadcast, I keep referring to RPOs, run-pass options, but almost every running play has a built-in quick screen, a built-in bubble screen, a one-step hitch. So if the look isn't perfect, the quarterback won't hand the ball off. He throws these run-pass options. It's driving me crazy. If I was a running back, I would punch the quarterback. Give me the ball. But these RPOs are taking over the world. And Let's get on to something else because my heart is starting to pop.
But is it effective, though? I get it. I mean, we hear you doing it every week, but isn't it?
No, I don't think it is effective. I think what's effective is handing the ball to D'Angelo Williams and getting the heck out of the way. I thought that was very good football the other night, and then faking it to D'Angelo Williams and throwing a bomb to a great receiver. I like old school football. I appreciate some of these new ideas. I think there's a time and a place. But it's almost every single play, and that's why you don't see running backs getting back-to-back carries. Not only are they not getting 100 yards a game, it's rare that a running back ever gets the ball on back-to-back carries. I don't know how these guys get in a rhythm like they used to.
I completely agree. Old school doesn't mean it has to be out of the way. You can mix new school and old school. I completely agree with you. Let's look ahead to Monday night. You'll be in Chicago where the Bears, they lost to the Texans. Philly gets to win. Everybody talking about Carson Wentz. In your early film study, what are some of the matchups you're looking for here?
I think Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears, is excellent. They do an outstanding job disguising coverages. They don't have the household names on defense that the Chicago Bears used to have. But Jarrell Freeman came over from the Indianapolis Colts. He's a tackling machine. Floyd, their number one draft choice, shows some promise as a pass rusher. They're very young in the secondary, but they're going to give Carson Wentz a lot of disguises. I'm anxious to see Fangio versus Wentz. And I just got to see more from the Chicago Bears on offense. They only had 23 minutes of time of possession, and if they keep their defense out there like they did last week against Houston, it's just a matter of time.
It's Carson Wentz and the Eagles against Jay Cutler and the Bears Monday Night Football this coming week from Chicago. One more for you, John, that just jumped back into my head. You still make your home down there. Did you get a chance to see much of Jameis Winston this past weekend? He might have had as impressive a quarterback performance as any in the league, and I'm hearing huge things from people I talk to about the expectations for him in year two. What did you see from Jameis?
I saw a lot. I saw a lot last year in his rookie season. The way he handles the pocket under pressure situations, it brings out the best in him. And he's got a couple beasts at wide receiver. If you don't double Mike Evans, you're going to get burned. This guy's a great young player. Vincent Jackson's done it a long time. They have a couple runners, I think, that are very good. Charles Sims, what he did after the catch. People don't know about Charles Sims, but he's dynamic in the passing game. And Doug Martin's a Pro Bowl halfback. Dirk Cutter has a lot to work with on offense. And Jameis Winston is one of the premier competitors, future star. And I think they can challenge to make the playoffs this year. I really do.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The stars of His and Hers, which you see noon weekdays here on ESPN2. Michael Smith and Jamel Hill are here, T-shirts and all. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing well.
I love seeing that. Just the beautiful smile on Jamel's face that come Saturday afternoon is going to be wiped away when your team gets smoked by mine.
Oh, Golic. Fiction is fun, huh?
Come on,
Fiction
seriously? You're coming to our place, Michigan State, playing Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Yeah, because we've never beaten you there before.
Yeah.
We handed you some serious butt whoopings there. But I'm looking forward to it. It's a great test, especially for us. I didn't love having the bye week this early in the season, but because there were a lot of stuff.
Is that the start of the excuse?
No, it's not the start of the
excuse,
and not at all. But I just didn't love it from the standpoint. It's like I felt like we needed another game, especially after seeing Furman, some sloppiness, some other things. But trust me, we'll be ready. We always are when we come there.
So what y'all putting on it? Y'all just going to talk or what?
Oh, we'll have to think of something here.
Think of some creative.
A lot of things in this situation is because I'm so clearly the favorite is what are you willing to do? What are you willing to lose? Because I'm pretty confident about the whole thing.
Trash talk game is A1 right now.
Mike will tell you that, especially when it comes to food challenges. Look, I ain't no punk Golic. Like I'm not one to back down. So you're not scaring me.
All right.
Space and opportunity, big boy.
But she's no Jim Harbaugh. She draws the line at boogers. She would not eat boogers.
I've never eaten a booger. I don't even know why this is. Everybody thought I was lying, and I'm just like, I've never eaten a booger, never would.
Well, that turned quickly, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, wants to get up and leave now. Greeny's done.
It took a turn from which it may not recover. One of the
that's
greatest.
you get when you have us on.
One of the greatest things that ever happened to me actually came from a Notre Dame Michigan State bet. Because, Golic, you made a bet with Magic Johnson on the air about a Notre Dame Michigan State football game that I was sure you were going to lose. Notre Dame beat Michigan State. Magic had to send you some autographed jerseys.
Jerseys, he did,
and
yes.
For reasons not only to him, he wound up sending me one and my son one.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. The amount of money I made on eBay. Oh, wait. Okay. It's hanging up beautifully in my...
All right, so a couple
great.
of things we want to have some fun here, a few serious topics to get to as well, but a little fun beforehand. And one of them is this. I don't know if you saw what the White Sox did yesterday, but they put,
1,122 dogs had to be in their seats for 10 minutes. And they were, and they got a Guinness Book of World Records.
And Mike and I are old enough to remember a time when, like, the Guinness Book of World Records was a big deal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now, they're giving you a record for that. And as you look through it, like, the largest collection of garden gnomes. And, just the
Old
stupidity.
pugs in a minute.
Yeah.
I've seen all of that, yeah.
So we're soliciting from our audience, and maybe you can help us, or maybe you'd like to get involved. Let's set a record. There's got to be some record we can set. So here we go. James tweets, how many donuts can Golic eat off the floor before Greeny hurls?
It's a really good combination of brands right there. I like that.
Yeah, I do like that.
Matt tweets, the longest broadcasted sports show on television completely nude. Any chance we're doing that?
Listen, because your team beat my team one time, I took a picture completely nude.
I want to know what the existing record for that is now.
There probably is
good
one.
question.
We could break it a record.
Jeremy, by the way, whose Twitter handle is I eat lunch for dinner, which I think is
That's a great handle.
how about the record for the longest hug between two men while broadcasting live simultaneously on the radio and television? Hashtag bro hug.
There's not a chance you would do that.
Let's just do the show hugging.
You don't even want to shake hands anymore. You want to do a fist pump or an elbow pump. You're not going to hug me because let me tell you, if we're going to do that just for fun, I'm not showering for days before that.
Well, why would you do that? I mean, we could come in
because I'd rather gross you out more than set a record.
Let's do the 4-hour simultaneous broadcast and bro hug. That would be a record. I think that would make the record book.
I'm curious as to what
Did somebody already
do this?
My point is it hasn't ever been done before.
Right, so you guys can set the
we can do it for a minute.
I'm guessing the moment we begin it, we will have set a record.
And the moment we begin it, I'm going to want to end it.
So what do you guys think? What do you think would be a good record to try and
one
set?
I heard earlier on your show, and especially, I guess, even more pertinent because Mike is here, is the most mics in the elevator.
Yeah.
I think you guys can do this.
I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's
There's got to be a lot of mics here at ESPN.
That's what I'm guessing. Put you guys all in the elevator. Hopefully no one's claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody's used the bathroom, and then just kind of go from there.
Nobody ate a burrito.
Yeah, exactly.
We're good.
How long do we have to stay in the elevator?
I don't know. That's up to the Guinness.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, if we could set a record, though, of some kind, I think it would be. I mean, why not? We've done a couple of other things in our lives.
I think it'd be cool. I want
to be in the Guinness Book of World Records.
You guys have done so much for us. We would love to help you.
Or you would, because my name isn't Mike. So.
Yeah,
I didn't know we'd settled.
You're out of this one. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Why do you think I suggested it? It's something I could be eliminated from.
Gotcha.
Let's get on to the next topic here. Are you on the Carson Wentz bandwagon? A week and a half ago, Sam Bradford was the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, and Carson Wentz was a shiny new toy they probably wouldn't unwrap until sometime close to Christmas. A week and a half later, the Vice President of the United States is telling the President of the United States, you got to get on the Wentz wagon. We played the soundbite earlier. And the San Francisco 49ers made a colossal mistake not taking him number one, and the Cleveland Browns made a colossal mistake trading away the number 2 pick. This is the narrative where we sit today.
Right, gotcha.
Are you on the wagon?
I'll wait for the next stop. I'll get the next one. I like the kid. I liked him, coming out of college. I appreciated the Eagles' aggressiveness, even though they're like, well, why are you going up to get another quarterback? You got Bradford, you signed Chase Daniel. It's just like it's too crowded. I appreciated investing in the most important position in the sport, if not all of sports. I like his skill set, but I'm sorry. One game against the Browns at home, I mean – I don't need to get on the bandwagon just yet. I think I'm okay to wait a second and pump the brakes. Typically, I'm the person to put people in Canton off preseason. But no, I'm joking. I really don't do that. I really don't do that. I'm joking. But no, I mean, we've seen a lot of guys have great first impressions. His counterpart had one of the greatest rookie debuts we've ever seen in RG3. Now, that bottomed out for different reasons, but I think you got to be intelligent about it and give it some time. But you can still like the kid and not get on the so-called bandwagon.
Well, I think it's okay to like him and not make it an indictment of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because, look, as we've seen throughout the history in the NFL, there's just different ways to groom a quarterback. I think it's okay to appreciate the baby steps that they take. I said this about Dak Prescott as well. Like in the preseason, that was a baby step. That is us seeing, because look, if it was easy, every rookie would come in and do what he did in preseason, but it's not. And he seemed a little bit more prepared than some of the rookies maybe that we're accustomed to seeing. To me, even against the Browns, who obviously there's a serious talent deficiency, he showed enough that you see the promise. You see why they moved up. You see why they invested, and you see why it makes all the sense in the world through highs and lows for them to continue to play this kid and just kind of live with whatever mistakes. So I like what I've seen, and I guess if it's a question of buying stock, then I would definitely be willing to buy some stock.
If you're an Eagles fan, just live in the moment, though. Like, as toxic as it had been for the last year, you should just be floating on cloud nine.
And you said right there, live in that moment, because through the Chip Kelly years, while they started out, we had a couple of 10-6 seasons. Some of the moves he made were very questionable and didn't work out. So understand, even before Wentz, what happened? They give Bradford all that money, you kind of scratch your head. Bradford wants to be no part of it, but they're not trading him away, and God knows they wouldn't have got a one for him trading him then, so they didn't trade him away. They said they're going to be the starter. You had money invested in him. You get a circumstance where you can trade him. You get a 1 and a conditional 4 for Bradford, and then if Wentz shows any promise at all, already you have just turned the thumbs down to a thumbs up to moves panning out for you compared to what had gone on the last couple of years.
So a lot of people's season started well. Some have not. No one's has started better, if you look at it that way, than the Eagles. Mike and Jamel are here with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, half the cost. Let's move to a different topic. I was fascinated by this story. Did you see the story about Denver's chief of police, Robert White, who invited Broncos linebacker Brandon Marshall to come discuss his decision to kneel during the national anthem to protest racial oppression and police brutality? He invited Marshall and gave him the chance to ride along with police and watch Shoot, Don't Shoot training, which teaches officers to make split-second decisions during dangerous situations. And apparently they met for nearly an hour, and I, for one, really appreciated what the police chief said. He said, there are a lot of people that will raise issues and be negative and be what my kids call haters, no matter what you do, and let it go with that. He has issues. He has questions as it relates to what we're doing. He acknowledged some of those challenges. He wants to do something about it. And part of doing something about it is going to the source of where you think some of those issues are. So we look at something that has become such an extraordinarily divisive issue, when obviously the best case scenario for everyone, I would think, would be to look at it and say, we're all Americans. We should all want the best for everyone. We may disagree on how to get there, but at least let's come together and try and talk about it. So you would take two people who on the surface would appear to be on opposite sides of this, police chief, kneeling football player, and you put them together and they talk and they come to some sort of understanding. This feels to me like the closest thing to something tangible that has come out of this that I've seen so far.
Well, I think the question is, and I don't know, I can't say off the top of my head what the immediate or even long-term history has been with the Denver Police Department and the African-American community there. But the dialogue, I think, is obviously very important for police officers. I understand that they don't want to be indicted or painted with a broad brush, that they're all bad and they all have nefarious intentions and they just go around haphazardly practicing racism against their own citizens. So I appreciate the Denver police chief's willingness to sort of come across the aisle and for them to engage in dialogue.
As opposed to the Santa Clara Police Union's initial
Correct,
reaction.
because we have seen in other cities some very strong comments, things that do not help the situation. I'd like to see a lot of that going on in some of the cities where there have been issues, Baltimore, Chicago, Los Angeles, where there have been those kind of tension points, to see if there might be some kind of avenue to have an even greater dialogue. I guess the main thing, and Mike and I have talked about this subject, it feels like every day for the last couple of weeks, is that there's a lot of talking, not a lot of listening happening. And so any examples we see of people listening to each other should be celebrated.
There's no question that's a constructive conversation. But I've said repeatedly that the issues existed long before Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And for those, even though the issues that he spoke specifically about are the current hot button issue, which is police brutality. Police brutality is but a symptom, a tragic symptom, a fatal symptom of the disease that is systemic racism. It's a branch on a very large tree that is this society, which is rooted in racism and oppression. So that's not the only issue that's going on. People, that's the one that Colin Kaepernick specifically cited, yes, but it's the result of institutional racism. That's police brutality is the end result of something that is much deeper than just an encounter, a shoot, don't shoot training. Okay, it runs much deeper than that. So I would just like for people to not focus on trying to argue down the points that are being raised with misleading statistics a lot of times, and understand the root of the issue goes simply beyond a conversation between an athlete taking a knee. Because what could come of this? Does Brandon Marshall get a better understanding? Maybe so. Does he decide, okay, now I can stand up, or now I can go and share this with somebody else? Absolutely. Does that change how people of color have historically and currently are still viewed in this country? It's a long way from that happening.
But
that's
at least
what this
it's
is about.
something happening.
I'm not dismissing this at all.
No.
It's
I'm going to a point that still blows my mind. You have Jerry Jones, you have Dabo Sweeney still saying, basically, I understand you have the right to do it, but I don't like the way you did it. I'm so tired of people telling other people how they should protest. And then they feel good because they said, well, I don't like the way they do it. They put it in their box and they're done with it instead of looking at the issue. And because of what Colin Kaepernick done, we've had tons of donations going on. Now we have an action here, Brandon Marshall with the chief of police. However small the action is, it's action. Yes. It's action going in a direction. I mean, isn't that what we're looking for? And, oh, by the way, it's all been done peacefully.
Well, I think we should also rewind, as often as possible, rewind to the beginning of this, the origin of this, which is Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. He sat for first of all, sitting. He sat for 2 games when he didn't dress. Nobody noticed. He sat for a 3rd game when he was dressed. Steve Weish of NFL Network asked about it. He wasn't asked about it. Well, he didn't say, hey, guys, come ask me why I sat for the national anthem. Colin Kaepernick made a personal choice that he felt uncomfortable. He, individually, felt uncomfortable standing and saluting a flag that he felt like symbolized a country that historically has not treated all people with equality. That was his personal choice. So for this to be some kind of, people have taken it and said, okay, this is a movement. Well, it helped to continue to drive a conversation that's been ongoing for a long time. But for people to look at what Colin Kaepernick did and other players have done after that and say, well, now what are you going to do? Like asking the oppressed to find a solution implies shared responsibility for the problem. And that's just historically inaccurate.
Yeah, and I guess when you brought up Dabo Sweeney, I know a lot of people reacted to his comments, some of which I thought were really positive and made a lot of sense. But he is still guilty of doing the same thing that Jerry Jones did, which is invalidating the experience of others that you can't possibly understand or relate to. And while I know it's very easy to summon Martin Luther King in these situations as being the model and example of, well, if you're more like these kind of protests, we keep running into this conversation about the right way to protest that you talked about, as if there's a guide to protesting. The protest is not here for your comfort or your convenience. And so for him to say, well, you shouldn't be a team distraction, as if Colin Kaepernick, if he did choose to call a press conference, wouldn't that be far more distracting or far more self-serving? Did
the Niners look at all distracted Monday night?
No, they didn't. They actually they look quite unified, all right? Cool. Not only that, as if he could go to another space, not at the stadium, and people would not realize he was the quarterback of the 49ers. Regardless, that label's following him everywhere. But I guess for me, that to me is more disappointing than anything, is that it's okay if you make the personal choice to stand for the anthem. You have that right to do so. But within you making the personal choice, don't invalidate somebody else based off what your choice is. Because Colin Kaepernick didn't say, hey, if you stand for the flag, then I ascribe this to you. He said, I'm doing this for me. Correct. This is the reason. That's the end. So it just bothered me to hear him say that. And again, to summon Martin Luther King as if we don't all remember how he died. That's what I find to be baffling about this. Or
to summon Martin Luther King conveniently, letter from a Birmingham jail.
Yeah, see, that's
emphasis on jail. Yeah. Okay, emphasis on jail. He talked about people who are more concerned with order than justice, who want to put a timetable on somebody else's freedom. He said, shallow understanding from those with goodwill is far more frustrating than outright misunderstanding from those with ill will. He said lukewarm acceptance is more bewildering than outright rejection. The moderate is what he had the biggest complaint about. He had the biggest complaint about the people who said, I understand where you're coming from and I get it, but this isn't the time or the way to do it. So it's like, again, he said a lot of great things in general about loving thy neighbor. I know he's a man of faith.
Right.
He espoused a lot of great. I respect that.
He did.
But don't say, oh, if there's a black president, they got black quarterbacks. Everything's, look how great it is. It's bigger than that. It's beyond that. It's for people who have not achieved that level of accomplishment.
I don't want to ascribe to your point exactly. I don't want to invalidate anyone's emotions on any subject. But sometimes when I hear people saying things like that, what I feel like
Wait, like
hearing,
what? I'm sorry.
Like saying this is not the time or the place.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
What I feel like I'm hearing, I'm not trying to put words in Dabo's mouth or anybody else's, but what I feel like I'm hearing, at least some of the time, is I'm hearing people say, you're making this very hard for me to ignore. And I was much happier when I was able to ignore this conversation. So if you would do it at some other time, it would work much better for me. You can still do whatever you want, but I could go back to ignoring it, which is what I really liked doing. And that, I think, is what has happened here. Whether Colin Kaepernick meant it when he began it this way or not, what he has become is something that I think has become something of a movement that is impossible to ignore, and that's why it's making a lot of people feel uncomfortable.
Well, the thing is about that, Greeny, to echo your point, is that when they say, well, this isn't the place or this isn't the situation or this isn't the time, well, when is it? I mean, and if we look at most of the dramatic change that has gone on in our country, if we were still waiting on people to be ready or for people to feel comfortable, we'd still be drinking at separate water fountains, okay? Because that's not how protest and change happens. It happens at the ultimate point of discomfort. We forget that it was just a few years ago, everybody in this country was arguing about marriage equality. All right, which is why Megan Rapinoe took a knee, and I understood where her perspective was. But so this idea that there's this utopia protest that we can all be unified and we can all agree is just frankly just not reality.
You mean you didn't get the protest handbook?
I didn't. I didn't know. Is it every other Tuesday or how are we doing this?
I'm just amazed at how people only get into a protest or what it's about if they like the way it's done.
That to me, I'm on the opposite with you, Greeny. I don't think it's you're making this really hard for me. I think they have a problem with the message. The people that have a problem with what he's doing, because I said repeatedly, the anthem played on. Way more people, exponentially more people stood proudly for the anthem than those that knelt or raised a fist or anything else. What somebody does next to you or down in the field has no bearing on how you feel about the anthem. America went on. America will continue to go on and be the great country that it is, with or without the endorsement of those who decide not to stand and salute the flag in your presence. I think that people are really upset about the message behind it. And this is a convenient way of saying, instead of me coming out and saying, you know what, take your Black Lives Matter and shove it. Or instead of pointing the finger at America, look in the mirror and, quote unquote, fix your community, stop so-called black-on-black crime.
What about Chicago?
What about Chicago? The people that they want personal accountability on the part of the black community, but when somebody points the finger at America and says, well, this is systemically how it's set up for it to be, then that's the problem. The problem is when people point the finger at America, hit dogs start hollering.
That's what I'm talking about. I think we're saying the same thing. That's what people are trying to ignore.
No, you said they don't want to ignore it, but I'm saying they're way more accepting of guys standing up and saying, I'm going to do something in my community. They're way more open to embracing community activism as opposed to fighting for equality from an injustice, a systemic standpoint. They're way more comfortable because that suggests that the onus is only on the oppressed to find the solutions.
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing on that.
No, we're not fundamentally disagreeing. I'm saying I think there's a subtle difference between just saying, you're making it really hard on me. No, they're making it easy to avoid the real issue by bringing the flag into it. It's much easier to harp on the timing or the format of the protest than it is to actually look in the mirror and address, well, wait a second, where are they coming from? But
I agree.
We probably are.
But what I'm saying is I think part of it now has moved past the flag, which I think was necessary for this discussion to move forward at all. If it was just centered solely on the flag, so when all of a sudden you have like the Seahawks and the Chiefs who are all standing and interlocking arms, that's making an entirely different statement that isn't disrespecting the flag, exactly, which is forcing people to then confront, oh, wait a minute, so this wasn't about the flag, this is about something else. Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk about that. That's much more uncomfortable to be talking about that. It's much easier for me to sit here and say, no, you must respect the flag. Yeah. That's an easy thing for a lot of people to say. It's a lot more complicated and a lot easier to ignore what Colin Kaepernick's message actually was beyond the way he was trying to deliver it. I don't know if I'm saying that well or not.
You are, man. Group hug.
Yeah, there you go.
Fullbug.
And it's been so serious. So to finish lighting it up, I'm all caught up on Power, so we're all good and discussing
Look,
that.
I
man.
told you, best season, right? That they've had so far. I know they're just
Still ain't got all. You still reading books and stuff?
all this reading I'm sitting around doing.
Mr. Smarty Audio over there, you ain't watching TV like the rest of us.
You can watch these guys on TV every weekday, noon Eastern, his and hers here on ESPN2. Thank you both.
I love y'all, man. Seriously, group hug. Let's lock arms.
Is that a
the
record?
Guinness Book of World Record.
Group hug after the ND Michigan State game.
Oh, I'll send you some green and white donuts.
Steph Curry was on the Ellen Show with Michelle Obama, and they were talking about how Steph plays golf with the president a lot, and they were getting into like the idea of trash talk. And the First Lady actually said, you could make fun of his ears for those who didn't get to hear it, which I found hilarious. But here's the thing that when we have met presidents, which we've had the great, wonderful opportunity to do, the notion of trash talk, there's so much, for lack of a better word, pomp and circumstance surrounding the president that I can't imagine getting comfortable enough, getting to a place where you're comfortable enough that you're having just a sort of a man-to-man conversation, or man-to-woman conversation, as might become the case. With sort of a normal discussion.
Curry's in a position where he is in that. We weren't. He's playing golf with the president.
That's what I mean.
I know there's a lot of surrounding area when you're playing basketball with him as well. I know there's people on the perimeter, but, it is a little bit of a more intimate setting where maybe you can.
Well, I get it. Like Kornheiser and Wilbon play with him all the time, so I tried to ask Tony about it. He doesn't give you a lot of details. Yeah. But like, are you just hanging out like pals?
Have you completely dropped your guard and like kind of saying?
He still has to be Mr. President, right? I mean,
yes.
You are instructed when you meet the president ahead of time. You get for those who've never had the privilege. You are sort of instructed ahead of time of how you are to address him and all that. Yeah.
You know how it is out in the golf course.
Yeah.
Having a few pops occasionally.
Yeah.
Think the president heads out into the woods? Know what I'm saying?
No, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
What?
I'm not allowing you to have this conversation on the air. No, I'm not.
Wait a minute. Is he a male human being that pees in the woods that any golfer has done?
No.
Have you ever done it?
Don't do this. Have I ever done it? Yes, I've done it.
Okay. It's done.
I'm not talking about this.
So is it wrong to think that the president may have to do that?
Moving on.
You think maybe they're landing Marine One there and taking him to a bathroom real quick, or what? I mean, seriously.
Moving on.
Okay.
From this conversation to any other.
Got to water a tree. Got to water a tree. That's just the way it works. All right? What do you want me to say?
I want you to say anything other than what you were currently saying.
How much you think that holds up? What's going on? Is the whole golf course empty?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
So, I mean, would they do it like on a Monday when aren't normal courses?
Well, they have a course at Camp David where he plays. I don't think anyone else is there.
Oh, so okay. So that
no, he might go other places. I think they played in Congressional and some of the other courses around DC.
But if they go somewhere in a day where everybody's allowed to play,
no, they close it ahead of time. This is planned well in advance. He's not just showing up at Bethpage Black, and waiting to get in the lottery.
No. My point was, it's planned well in advance, so they just close it all down.
You're not like hitting into his group. Oh, make sure you lay up. The president's on the green. Don't take that 3-wood out.
Ready to play. He's got to keep it going as well, right?
Seriously. See, what is the While We're Young was the campaign that Jack Nicklaus was there for a while. Tee it forward and all that kind of stuff. Pace of play is a major concern. No, they close the golf course when the president is playing there, and there's Secret Service all over the place.
How would you hit against it? I mean, you don't handle pressure well. Would you struggle there?
I'm playing well now. I'm telling you right now.
I didn't ask that question.
Yeah. I'd like to play Steph.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like to play Steph. I would handle playing Steph better. No, I would fold playing the president.
You're playing well now. You're working out well. You're all buffed. I mean, boy, it's just your world now, isn't it?
I'm feeling myself a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you.
No kidding. So it's called swiping the iPad.
Swiping the Midas. All right, Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. I don't know what has become of us today.
I don't either.
Let's get to a little football conversation here. So, Trent Dilfer was this from Ursillo and Cannell? Because one of the big topics in the sport right now is Jared Goff. Because I feel like the entire narrative surrounding Carson Wentz has become a little bit unrealistic. You want to talk about the ultimate overreaction, but it really is the perfect storm for overreaction. You have the following circumstances. Wentz vaults from a guy who wasn't even going to play this year to starting and playing a magnificent game against a really bad team.
Right.
against the team that traded away the pick that was used to draft him.
And they didn't have him rated high enough to take number 2.
And apparently, and then in the same opening weekend, the guy who was drafted ahead of him, who they also gave up a lot to move up to get ahead of him to get the number 1 pick, isn't even active for a team that loses 28-0 and only manages 10 first downs. So it's the perfect storm for overreaction to Carson Wentz, who, oh, by the way, has the number 1 selling jersey in the NFL.
Throw in there the fact that Dak Prescott took over the preseason and everybody was talking about him. Then all of a sudden he was the starter and could be the savior for the Cowboys. Carson Wentz, for a second round or number 2 pick overall, kind of in the last couple of weeks came out of nowhere to all of a sudden be the guy in a tough place to play football if things aren't going well city. And as you just said, number 1 selling jersey. Things right now going well.
Sports Center with Mike and Mike, brought to you by DraftKings, the destination for one-week fantasy football. Use our name Mike as the code. You can play in this weekend's free $100,000 contest, no deposit required. That's Mike at DraftKings.com. Now eligibility restrictions may apply. See site for details. Okay, the wheels clearly came off the show here in the last few minutes. I take responsibility for that.
Why is it so wrong to think a president can go pee in the woods? I mean, I don't understand what's so bad about that. Do we think he's never done it in his life, even before he was president, when he was golfing?
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about this.
We never heard from him. I've seen a couple of minutes. Meet you up in up the fairway a little bit. Got to make a quick stop.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Golic, I have to tell you, I was getting a little worried.
About?
I was worried about Danny Cannell.
Why is that?
He hasn't sent any tweets this morning criticizing anything that we've said, calling us stupid, or anything like that. So I was worried something had happened to him.
Do we think, Danny, as Danny Cannell joins us now, have you ever gone a complete day without tweeting?
Yes, I have taken some times off where I've been like, okay, I'm going to go on a family vacation for a week. And in that vacation, I'll take a day. I won't go the whole vacation, but I'll go a day or two without it. Just go, and I get a little twitchy. I get a little bit, irritable because I can't check. I don't know what's going on. So I do have a problem. I'm well aware of it.
It's a monster college weekend, and I want to start looking ahead to some of those games. But I want to start with what I think is the subject of the entire week 1 of the NFL season, and that is these 2 quarterbacks and the juxtaposition of Jared Goff not playing at all, not suiting up for a Rams team that could barely muster a first down against San Francisco, and Carson Wentz going out there, albeit against what we expect to be a bad team in Cleveland, and playing as well as he did. Again, you would have watched these guys in college 1,000 times more than I would have. What was your perspective? Remind everyone on them coming in, and why do you think they are where they are right now?
I thought Jared Goff would be the safer choice. And, man, I might look wrong, really wrong on this one because – and I was full disclosure, I said I do have a hard time watching film of a guy like Carson Wentz at North Dakota State playing against subpar competition. And it's a fact of the matter. He's playing against guys that are smaller, they're not as fast, the defenses aren't as complex. So that's all I really had to go by was the film of that. So I said, all right, you can have all the measurables, you can have all the height, weight, arm strength, but I don't know until I've seen a guy do it, which I think is fair. Some guys are more willing to take a risk and say, okay, I've seen enough, I know it. And I think it always helps to evaluate a player fully is to get in a room with him. And I never met Carson Wentz, didn't get to sit down with him. So it's hard to get a real, hey, this guy has that it factor because you can't tell. And with Jared Goff, I mean, I saw him in a system where he wasn't under center much. That's cause for a little bit of concern, where he's not calling plays, which looks like it might be much more of a concern. But we've seen other guys do it, and have success with it. So I thought he played against better competition. We even drew up some plays in here on the board sometimes where he's under pressure. But it looks to me like, and you're just talking about a system and a situation, and this is one thing that Trent Dilfer talks about all the time. Anytime I talk about it, he sends me a text. He's like, amen, you keep telling it. You're only as good as your surroundings. You really are as a quarterback. And there are only a handful in the history of the game who have been able to elevate an entire team and an entire organization to, all right, this is all of a sudden a playoff team. And what I see now is Carson Wentz's surroundings are much better than what Jared Goff is working with, and we saw that play out.
I agree with that, and I agree mostly with what Trent says, but you still have to put some on the player, right? I mean, we're not completely skating on the player, but we also have to understand it's more for those that are saying it's just the player are wrong as well. It's the environment and the coaches, because as I've asked, what quarterback have they consistently had there with the Rams with that staff? So let me ask you, and it may be tougher to answer, in what you've seen out of him in preseason, what do you see as some of the deficiencies that made him go all the way to be deactivated for game one?
Well, and this isn't even going from the game film. This is going off Hard Knocks, which is probably not fair to him. But when I see a quarterback who can barely get the play out of his mouth in the huddle, and look, we've all been there. It happens to everybody. But all of a sudden, that plays on national TV, and people are like, oh, maybe this guy's bright enough, which is not a fair assessment yet. It's too early to do that. And before we write off Jared Goff, I mean, it is only 1 week.
Right.
And, and Jeff Fisher is making this statement of, hey, and I've heard people say, well, he played Steve McNair, he sat him out for a couple years. That was in 1995. This is a different era where the expectations of guys, and they should be, because guys are more prepared to come in and start than ever before, where the expectations are elevated. So if you're not there and able to at least call a play and suit up for a game, it does look like it's time to hit the panic button, although I think we need to just take a deep breath, wait, let's see what happens when he does play. And maybe they're protecting him, because watching that offense, I don't know if I would want to be on the field with that team.
Mike and Mike, Danny Cannell's in our studio. Time now for the championship drive, brought to you by Dr. Pepper. And we have 4 monster games this weekend. So let's take them. Actually, Chris Felica, who you all know as the Bear from College Game Day, had a good tweet yesterday. This is the first time in the history of the AP poll that number 1, number 2, and number 3 each play a true road game against a ranked opponent in the same week. So Alabama and Clemson, or not Clemson,
Alabama, Florida State,
and Florida State,
Ohio State,
and Ohio State, all with interesting tests. If I told you one of them is going to lose, Danny, and only one, which one do you think might lose?
I'd be most concerned if I was Ohio State, because I don't know what they are yet. They played Bowling Green and Tulsa and had 2 blowout wins, and that's great. They've done exactly what they're supposed to do. You look around at teams like Clemson who have struggled against lower tier opponents. You're like, oh, that's cause for concern. So Ohio State has a lot of things to be positive about, things to be happy about. But they're going against a team in Oklahoma that has their backs against the wall. You're going into Norman. You're playing on the road, which will be a hostile environment. Not to say that Louisville or any of the other places won't be, but it's one for me where, and I think Oklahoma is a good team. I picked them to make the playoff. I did not pick them to beat Houston. And I think it's about time we start looking at Houston as, oh, this team is really good. And maybe that loss isn't as bad as we thought it was or thought it would be going into the season. So I'd be concerned for Ohio State.
And then how about Florida State's going to Louisville? This kid, Lamar Jackson, is a human video highlight. He's unbelievable out there. Now, we know there are great athletes at Florida State. So this guy running the ball and throwing the ball, how do you see that?
If I'm Florida State, there is one game plan, and it is how do you stop Lamar Jackson? That's got to be it. And that's Charles Kelly, the defensive coordinator. The game plan has to be, all right, what do we do to contain this guy? We cannot let him beat him. He has 13 touchdowns in his first 2 games. And you can say, well, it's against Charlotte, it's against Syracuse, but if you watch the film, his athleticism jumps off the screen when you watch it. It's very similar to Michael Vick, the way he runs the football. He's that electric. He has that type of playmaking ability. Last year, he had over 1,000 yards rushing. Where he's continued, this is what gets even more scary, is he's developed as a passer. Last year, I think they were limited in the pass game, what they could do with him. He's better this year, but that's where I would say, all right, how good, how far have you come in this Bobby Petrino offense where you are able to beat teams in the air? Because I think that's got to be Florida State's number 1 priority. Don't let Lamar Jackson beat you on the ground. Let's see what he can do through the air. And Florida State now, without Derwin James, who was maybe one of the best defenders in the country, that's going to make that challenge even tougher. And I always say this, and people kind of mock me and say, well, what happens? Noon games, for me, are a nightmare. Like, I just would not want to have to face a team, a game of that magnitude that early in the morning.
Because,
I mean, look, when I was in college, when you guys were in college, I didn't function that well before 1, 2 p.m., and you can go back and say, well, look at teams that do play well. Just from the whole scope of things, coaches are about habit, right? You want to creatures of habit. And you are not used to being game ready, game woke, woken up at noon. So it's kind of sometimes you'll see teams off to a slow start. And I hear people, hey, it's the big game. It's a huge crowd. It just is a whole different animal when you're trying to get guys ready to go.
I understand when you say a noon game when your day starts. If you normally start, depending on if your game's later in the afternoon, you start later in the morning. Well, everything gets backed up a couple hours. So, now wake-ups at 6:30, or earlier. And guys, then there are the players that like to get there earlier than others. That whole thing just got a lot earlier.
And it works
for
both teams.
Yes,
it's not to say that Louisville doesn't have the same challenges. It's just, for me, if you're the favorite in that game, I feel like that's one of the ones where it's kind of scary.
I understand what you mean, because when I'm rooting for a team that I think
Northwestern has struggled this year.
Well, no, I mean some people would say that's how we beat Stanford last year. I heard a lot of people saying that.
Oh, and forget it, a West Coast team coming east where it's an even earlier kick in your body clock. Forget it.
Yeah. And actually, the second Northwestern game wasn't even that. It was a late afternoon game. But to your point, if I'm rooting for a team that I think is the better team, I never want it to be a weather game, because then it might become which team handles the weather better rather than who's the better team. In this case, maybe it becomes who handles the hour better rather than which is the better team. So we look at those two, and that leaves us with Alabama, Ole Miss. And, oh, by the way, Ole Miss has beaten Alabama each of the last 2 years. So
that's why I love Alabama in this game. And I picked Ole Miss to beat Alabama last year. But are you kidding me if you think Nick Saban doesn't have his team primed and ready for this challenge? Even though it's on the road, all they've heard about is how this is one of the teams that have beat them. This is one of the teams that's owned them. And one of the reasons they do have success against Alabama is because they do what gives a team like Alabama problems. Like with Russillo and Cannell, I talked to Ryan. I'm like, I have a rule with Alabama, and I instituted it last year when LSU lost to Alabama. I said, I'll never pick a team to beat Alabama in a pro-style system, right? Because you're not going to line up and smash them in the mouth and beat them. Where you can expose them, not even expose them, but where you can create some mismatches is by spreading it out, going fast, and having a mobile quarterback. Like those three things combined level the playing field somewhat, because you're still not going to be able to match up talent-wise, but at least you can find some mismatches. You can get them on their heels a little bit, stop them from making substitutions, and then the X factor is Chad Kelly. And I mean, last year they beat them. Alabama turned the ball over five times. I don't see that happening again. I just don't see Alabama going in with a letdown for the third year in a row.
And go ahead.
I wanted to just pick up one other thought on that, because we had Feinbaum on yesterday, and it struck me as somewhat funny, all the attention that Nick Saban chewing out Lane Kiffin got when, I mean, how many times have we seen coaches very demonstrative, yelling at players, wearing out players? Dabo Swinney did it last year to one of his players. I feel like no one ever talks about that. He yells at a coach who's another adult, and suddenly this has become like the top story in various places. Did anyone else find that sort of a curious phenomenon?
Well, I think also wearing a coach out in a blowout victory, is another thing as well. And then what it meant, and it may be a message going forward of let's not be comfortable. So, Lane Kiffin was used a little bit there.
Nick Saban is a genius, the way he does things, and this was a message to his entire team. Right. Look, nobody's above reproach. Nobody's above getting dressed down.
So let me ask you this:
Yeah,
does he? Honest moment now. Does he go over to Kiffin before he does that and whisper to him, "Listen, Lane, I'm going to scream and yell at you. I'm going to curse at you. I'm going to humiliate you in front of everyone on national television. This is my way of sending a message to the players."
You're going with the baseball way. The manager will go up to the umpire, "Hey, toss me out," right?
Yeah,
hey, toss me out of the game.
Is that what happened?
Waging, they're like, "Hey, toss me out. I want to send a message." No, I don't think so. I don't think
so either.
Nick Saban is as genuine as it gets, and I think he's genuinely that disturbed, even though they're up 38-3 at the time. They gave up a late touchdown. He is genuinely disturbed that his team is not winning by 50 and that they've been careless.
So you mean you think that was legit? That wasn't.
I think
it
was
real.
But in a situation where a coach wants to send a message, I think they would tell that coach afterwards.
Yes,
because you want that true reaction from the coach getting yelled at. You don't want to let them know before. That may change how they react to it, and then after the game, you say, "Dude, I went a little hard on you for a reason."
I don't even think Saban.
No,
I don't even think he gives him an explanation. Even Lane Kiffin, he's just like, "Hey."
About other coaches, not Saban. I think Saban was absolutely did exactly what he wanted to do there.
Yes. The College Football Playoff Trophy presented by Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper, it's a college football tradition.
So Notre Dame and Michigan State, before we even get to the game, kind of the same situation of a noon game. Here you have Michigan State playing Furman and then having a bye. Mm-hmm. Jamel Hill, a proud alum of Michigan State on earlier, said, that kind of worries her. So you didn't get a great test from a great team.
At least you got one.
Then you had a bye, and now you're going to Notre Dame, a team that has 2 games under their belt already.
And 2 really good tests,
yeah.
Especially a game when they figured out their quarterback, most importantly, going with Deshaun Kaiser. I think that's the thing why I feel most comfortable about Notre Dame moving forward. The thing is with Mark D'Antonio and Michigan State, consistently, and I think we should all take responsibility, and I'm talking about we as analysts. I feel like we do, for the most part, respect them, but we constantly forget about just how good a job he does with his players. And other programs will write off, will say, well, look, they lost a lot of players, which Michigan State did, but they don't lose. Like when you see Ohio State getting 11, 12 guys drafted,
right, or
Alabama, 10 they don't lose players they lose a couple guys each year to the draft, but they're coached well. And that should be the biggest compliment to Mark D'Antonio. They play hard, and they play that chip on their shoulder better than maybe anybody in the country when you look at a team that's looking to prove something.
Always one of the most physical games of the year, and always good games. Those two teams, they get after it really well with each other.
Meanwhile, in the same conference, we have Jim Harbaugh. I'm going to play this again and see, Danny, if you can explain to us what the heck he's talking about. Jim Harbaugh is referring to the devil on your shoulder. Now, a lot of people that's a well-known expression. People, I have a little devil on my shoulder that tells me things to do from
Animal
time
House.
to time.
There you go.
Well, Animal House has the devil and the angel.
Yes.
We can't quote any of that.
No.
But Jim Harbaugh has his own version. He's named him. His name is Freddie P. Soft. And he was asked yesterday about Freddie P. Soft because he was frequently heard telling high school players at satellite camps this summer not to be like Freddie. And here's what he said.
He's a 4-inch guy that wears a cape and a hat with a plume in it, and he's just tall enough to talk right into your ear and tell you that you don't have to practice today. Why are you working so hard? Or get over there in the shade. No need to attack with enthusiasm unknown to mankind today. So take a break. Take a knee.
So that's, I mean, what am I supposed to make of that, Danny? I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with that.
He might be a crazy person. I think that's the first thing you go with, but there's no doubt in my mind that Jim Harbaugh is kind of feeding into this fire. Like, he's feeding into this reputation of being a little bit unstable so that people look at him and he's kind of always on edge. You never know what you're going to expect. Things like this show me why Jim Harbaugh is perfect for the college game and may not be perfectly suited for the NFL game. It's not to say he can't win, because he did that in San Francisco.
Yes, he did.
But where guys will buy into that, like I could see a college kid saying, oh, we got to watch out for Freddie. Let's not let him get into practice today. NFL guys are like, are you kidding me?
Well,
what are we doing here? Let's go to work. Like, that's the difference to me, and why I think he'll succeed at the college level, because they'll cycle through and guys will buy into that rah-rah stuff.
That said, if I were going to ask you, I'm creating a college, Golic University. Mm-hmm. And you could hire anyone in the world you want to coach the football team. I'm not asking for names, but a number. How many people out there would you hire before you'd hire Jim Harbaugh if your objective was to win?
I would take Nick Saban and Urban Meyer before him.
Okay. I knew you'd have two.
That's probably it.
That's my point. Is there three?
Jimbo Fisher would be in the discussion. Yeah. I think, too, it remains to be seen how does the long-term plan work out? And that was the question about Harbaugh. And I think the players will be fine. They'll roll through and they won't get tired of it. But what does everybody else that has to work with him on a daily basis think of him? And I think he will have a long, successful career there, because winning cures everything.
Cures
be
everything.
Whatever you want to be, as long as you're winning.
That's exactly
right.
Yeah,
I think he's in absolutely. And when you talk about a person who can instantly create culture change, which is what he did.
That's exactly right.
That's what you need.
He buys into the now of recruiting and how to make an 18-year-old want to come play for him, and that's why he got some of the recruits he got this year. And the message he's sending there, that's a universal message. He just picks a different way to do it that makes you pay, because you know what, we can all go to high school kids and sit there and say to them, keep working hard, kids. Don't take a day off. We can all say it the normal way you say it, and kids will sit there, the high school players sit there and go, la, la, la. But then you got somebody up there saying, there's this 4-inch guy on my shoulder with a cape and a plume telling me, why are you working? He has the delivery that makes you take an ordinary message and sit up and perk up your ears and listen to it.
A couple other guys I would look at. David Shaw at Stanford has done a phenomenal job. I would absolutely consider him in that conversation. And Dabo Swinney from Clemson. I think what he's built, if you look at the consistency with which they've won and look at their recruiting classes, I think he sometimes get overlooked.
How about if you're starting a new college and you want to start with a young up-and-comer? Tom Herman.
Yeah. What he has done, and having conversed with him a little bit through Twitter, and we DM'd a couple times, and we had some fun with Greg Ward Jr. and what he did. I mispronounced his name. I said Gary on one of our broadcasts, and he used that. Just a motivational. He should be a motivational speaker. If he wasn't that, and that's a lot. Again, it goes back to the 18 to 22-year-olds. They buy into that stuff.
I was amazed when he was here with us. Greeny, you weren't here that day, because afterward he went and like touched your microphone, because
I remember you played it for me. He befouled my microphone.
He did, but he told us that in this day and age, especially in the NFL, when they back off of practices and we're all concerned about obviously injuries and such, he makes every one of his players sign a piece of paper acknowledging that they know this will be the hardest training camp and most hitting training camp they've ever been in their lives. And he said, we get after it. They hit live. He said the only way you're learning how to tackle is to tackle and to hit. So he says, to hell with everything out there that's going on now. And not only it makes the kids sign a piece of paper knowing that they're in for torture and these practices, and he gets so much out of them.
One of the things, we had him on our show, and I asked him, because we had him after they beat Oklahoma, and one of the things I said about Oklahoma, I was like, they're bigger, they're more talented than Houston. That's why I picked Oklahoma to win. And I said, tell me, what is the talent gap between you and Ohio State, Florida State, Alabama, all these other teams that are these top-tier programs? And he said, we can't hang with them if you just go up with the eye test. But where we beat people is hitting them harder and playing harder football. And that's why he has them signed. My question would be, what do you have him sign next year? Is it the hardest camp? What do you do each year? But that's what makes great. They find ways to motivate.
Here's my question. Does Houston wind up in the Big 12? If they do, does Tom Herman stay there? If Tom Herman ultimately leaves Houston, I read a column yesterday someone sent me by Bruce Feldman suggesting that might be a place Art Briles winds up getting hired. Art Briles, who, as we all know, left Baylor in disgrace, for lack of a better way of putting it. That's where he came from. He was at Houston. Do you both think, or do either of you think, that Art Briles is ever the head coach of a major college football program again?
A major program? You mean right off the bat?
I mean, gets hired to be a head coach.
I don't know if it's a major.
No, I do. I think he'll get another opportunity. I think he'll probably have to go somewhere first, like the Bobby Petrino route, going to a Western Kentucky, somewhere smaller where you can kind of do it, where there might
60.
be some
I mean, he's not,
but you only have to go there for a couple of years.
No, he's, for lack of a better term, you kind of got to disappear for a little bit,
right?
Kind of be out of the thought process and then maybe come back. And I'm trying to think, why would Herman – I get what you're saying about a bigger school, but now they'd be in a Power 5. He'd get $5 million bump. They'd bump his salary again. Forget even the $5 million bump. I mean, he's going to be making a ton of money, not Nick Saban money at this point. But
so you think Herman stays in Houston?
Depending on where they are this year, I mean, if they go undefeated again, or not again, didn't do it last year, and don't get in, and then go to a Power 5, I'm sure he's going to be like.
And not knowing Tom Herman's personal situation, because you never know, that might come into play where your kids are. But if you stay at Houston, I feel like that's a gold mine, because you get all of a sudden you're in the Power 5, you're in the mix for a playoff, you live in a state that's talent rich, and you have a good city like surroundings. It's a great ideal situation. With Art Briles, just real quick, I think all that stuff aside, I would need to see him change more. Like he went on with Tom Rinaldi on game day and he apologized, but I need to see real genuine remorse and real genuine change and philosophy of what he would have moving forward before I would give him a chance.
First time skydiving? Sure is. Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump. Oh, wait. Should we be like in tandem? Tandem? That's a great idea. Are you a certified instructor? No, but I love parachutes and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it.